Not just the cookies, even if they had to be the real chocolate chip kind with salt flakes on top, like in the store, but the card. Especially the card. To most people, it's just a folded piece of coloured paper. But to Laya, it was so much more. It was her way of saying, I love you. I want you to care. I watched her sit at the kitchen table, her tongue slightly out of her mouth, as if she were concentrating carefully, applying each sticker, going over the letters twice to make them bolder. She asked me how to write happy birthday, and I helped. Then she asked how to write Belle, and I paused. Of course I knew how to write my sister's name, not because I couldn't spell it, but because it carried so much emotion in that moment. Belle and I were never close as kids. She was 7 years older, always neat and cool, the kind of sister who wouldn't play with you and would just say, "Don't touch my makeup." As we got older, we grew apart mainly because we were so different. Belle liked things to be neat, and I chose to live with chaos, honesty, and emotion. That's what motherhood forces on you. When Nate, my ex, left 2 years ago, Belle wasn't there. There was no takeout, no late-night phone call, just a cold, "I'm sorry." "You'll handle it, you're strong." That was her way of comforting me. And as much as I appreciated that encouragement, I would have traded it for someone who would simply sit next to me while I cried. But Talia Belle was a shining star. She wore high heels that clicked on the wooden floor, smelled of expensive perfume, drove a shiny white car that Laya called a spaceship. Belle was magic to her. So when Laya asked if we could bring her the card and cookies ourselves, I hesitated, not because I didn't want to see my sister again, but because I knew how easily she could hurt a child who still believed that everyone was good. Still, I nodded, because that's what motherhood is all about. You take calculated risks, hoping your child will grow up stronger, not more hurt. We wrapped the cookies in a tin. Laya insisted on the snowflake one, even though it wasn't Christmas, and she carefully tucked the card inside her jacket, right next to the heart. On the way to Belle's house, she didn't say much, just sat watching the scenery outside the window, humming softly. I could see her little feet bobbing up and down in excitement. My stomach was rumbling too, but for a completely different reason. We pulled up in front of Belle's townhouse. Everything was immaculate white and carefully arranged. Even the wreath hanging on the front door looked like it had been professionally designed. Laya reached for the box, clutching the card in her other hand. Before I rang the bell, I knelt beside her. "Hey," I whispered. "Are you excited?" She nodded quickly. "I tried hard, Mum. I think she'll like it." I smiled at her, but inside I hesitated, wanting to pull Laya back to keep her from facing whatever look might cross Belle's face when she opened the card, when she saw the words, "In my name there is a small heart above," or when I recognized the letter Bella missing, letters and at the end. But I didn't. I let Leia ring the bell. Belle opened the door with her usual perfect smile, a glass of wine in her hand, her neutral lipstick smudged. "Oh, look who's here," she said. Laya stepped forward, holding the card as if it were a treasure. That moment, a little hand holding out something made of glitter glue and love, is something I keep replaying in my head. Because what happened next had nothing to do with the card anymore. It was about the weight of love and the hurt of being taken for granted. And it all started on a very ordinary Sunday morning, a batch of cookies and a little girl who believed that giving with all her heart was the best thing she could provide. I knew we had entered her world when we entered Belle's house. The walls were off-white, the furniture was sleek and cold, the smell of eucalyptus hung like a warning. There was no clutter, no noise, no emotion. Laya's glittery, glue-covered fingers looked out of place, so did we both. Belle glanced at the cookie jar and set it on the kitchen island, fearing it would ruin the countertop. She wore a cream sweater that looked like it had never been washed. No lipstick, perfect nails, no hugs, just a thin smile and a, "You don't have to do all this." Laya didn't notice the coldness. Or maybe she did, but she was determined to make it a great birthday. She held the card close to her chest, waiting for the right moment to hand it over. I could see how proud she was and how hard she tried to impress someone who had never really deserved her admiration. We awkwardly stood there for a few minutes while Belle poured more wine. No one else was there. Belle had never liked crowds. "It's too much," she'd said. Then Laya stepped forward, eyes shining, and held out the card. "Happy birthday, Belle," she beamed. I smiled too. It was a moment when you could only hope that the recipient would understand what the gift was. Not just paper and glue, but love at the heart of a child placed in those tiny hands. Belle held the card gently as if it would break if she had too long. She opened it, paused, and then smirked. Without looking at Laya, she said, "She isn't even smart enough to write my name correctly." That was all. I'm not sure I've ever felt silence so deafening. My ears were ringing. I looked at Laya. She stood motionless in her glitter-stained sneakers. My face didn't fall. I didn't cry. I just stared at my aunt as if I still couldn't comprehend the truth of what I had just said. I saw her tiny lips move as if she was about to say something, but then stopped. I felt my chest burn. My hands gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. Every cell in my body screamed at me to speak up, to stand between my child and the cold criticism. But I didn't do anything, and I hated that part, the pause. Because in that moment I was weighing everything. If I spoke up, would it make things worse for Laya? Would it turn this meeting into a battle? Would Belle just take it lightly or laugh it off and make me out to be overly sensitive again? I was prepared for this meeting. I could handle Belle's rough edges, but nothing can prepare you for the moment someone else hurts your child and still smiles. And just as I was about to speak, Laya's voice rang out, breaking the atmosphere. Calm, clear. He looked Belle straight in the eye and said, "I wrote it like Dad wrote it in the text message he sent you." The air froze. My heart stopped beating. I didn't even understand what she meant, not right away. But Belle did. She blinked visibly. Her fingers curled slightly around the card as if it had become too heavy. I saw her swallow. Once, then again. As if trying to push the bitter taste of the words out of her throat. I looked at Laya, who was still standing there, not angry, not smug, just honest. There was no malice in her voice. It was the truth. A soft, razor-sharp truth. The kind of honesty only children can give because they don't know how much it costs or what the price will be. And then I felt it. A shift. The ground beneath us had tilted, and we were no longer in the middle of a social birthday visit. We were in the middle of something real. And Belle, she was no longer in control. Because what Laya had accidentally revealed was bigger than a misspelled name. It was a crack in the foundation. A sign that something had happened between Belle and Nate. Something private. Something Laya had seen when no one else realized she was watching. And suddenly the spelling didn't matter. What mattered was, this, my daughter, had just pulled back the curtain, and we were all looking at what was behind it. Laya had no idea what she had just said. The silence that followed that statement was heavier than any argument I'd ever had with my sister. I looked at Belle. She was blinking slowly as if trying to translate a sentence from some foreign language, a language she understood but didn't want to admit she understood. I spelled it like Dad spells it in his texts to you. 7 words, just 7 words from a 7-year-old. And it ripped apart something I didn't even know existed. At first I didn't understand. I just focused on Laya to see if she understood what I had just said. The little girl looked up at Belle with clear eyes. Not angry, not arrogant. Just a little girl proud that she had just fixed a mistake in the card. But I saw Belle's face change. Not all at once. She was good at hiding her emotions. But something else did. A tiny twitch in her cheek, her lips pursed, her hand tightened around the card, crumpling a corner, and that's when the pieces started to fit together. Liar had never seen Belle write her name. She must have spelled it from something she saw, and the only connection she had was from her dad. Nate. My ex-husband. I turned to look at my daughter, a brave, sensitive girl, more observant than I ever realized. I asked gently, "Honey, when did you see Daddy text Belle liar?" Shrugged. "Sometimes when I was playing games on your phone, you let me borrow it to play. I saw a message that said, 'Hey, Belle.' Then I remembered how you wrote her name." I could hardly breathe. The knot in my stomach, the vague doubt I'd been trying to suppress for years now, tightened, becoming a hard, apparent mass. I turned back to Belle, and I knew there had been something between them, or something was still going on. Belle did not deny. She did not defend. She gently placed the card on the counter, every movement very deliberate. Then, with her other hand, she picked up the wine glass. Her fingers trembled slightly, almost imperceptibly, unless you know her, which I do. And right then I knew she was backed into a corner. Not by me, not by Liar, but by the truth. A truth spoken by a child. The child had no idea that his words carried a stick of dynamite. I felt anger well up inside me, not just at Belle, at Nate too. To think that while I was trying to piece together a broken family, he texted my sister, and she responded. And the worst part was, they all thought Liar would never notice, that she wouldn't be able to connect the pieces. They could act behind closed doors, and a child's memory is too fragile and soft to retain details. But they underestimated her, and they underestimated me. I looked straight at Belle. "You're going to tell me right now what it is I said, calm but firm." My voice wasn't shaking, but my whole body was shaking, because if I hear this from anyone but you, I will never speak to you again. "I swear, Belle." She didn't look at me, just stared at her glass of wine. I wait. Finally she whispered, "It's not what you think. Cowardly. I don't care what you think it is," I replied. "It shouldn't be happening, in any form." Liar looked at the two of us, sensing the tension, though she didn't understand the cause. "What did I do wrong?" she asked, her voice tiny. My heart sank. I knelt beside her, gently cupping her tiny face with both hands. "No, honey, you did nothing wrong, because it is. She did everything right. I told the truth, without even knowing I was doing it. You said what no adult in that room dared to speak. And right then I made a decision. I'm tired of protecting the feelings of people who can't even protect my daughter's heart." I stand up. "Let's go." Belle opened her mouth as if to hold me back, but she said nothing, because what else could she say? I took Liar's hand, it was still warm with crumbs on it, and led her out of the white house, down the stone steps, past the mirror-stained car, back into the cold air outside, which strangely suddenly felt freer than anything inside the house. And that's when everything changed. Not just that day, but me. All these years I've tried to keep things calm and convince myself that Belle was just a difficult person and Nate was just a complicated person. But that day, that little moment, was the last time I apologized for drawing boundaries around the people I loved, especially a little person whose name was still written in glue and stickers. The card wasn't the only thing that was leaked. We didn't say anything in the car at first. Liar sat quietly in the back seat, still clutching the edge of her jacket where she had hidden the card. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of things said and things left unsaid. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other near my phone, which had vibrated twice as we left Belle's neighborhood. It was a message from Nate, as if the storm had summoned him. First message, I heard you stopped by Belle's. "Is everything okay?" Second message. She just texted me, said Liar said something weird. My throat tightened. Weird. No, that's not weird. It's the truth. And it's the truth that makes it so heavy. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. Because something inside me broke in that house. Not the dramatic kind of explosion, but the quiet, deep-seated fracture. Like a string that has been stretched too far and finally snaps. Belle could have lied, could have made something up, brushed it off, blamed Laya, said she misunderstood. But she didn't. She just said, "It's not what you think." A confession wrapped in cowardice, exactly what I thought, and worse. Now I'm starting to put the pieces together. The way Belle always took Nate's side whenever we argued. She always seemed to understand him in a way I never did. Even when he joked, "Belle is the only sane one in your family," whenever we argued. At the time I thought it was just a sarcasm. Now I know. It's something else. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Laya was looking out the window, her face calm, but I saw her thumb rubbing the hem of her jacket. It was a habit of hers when she was trying to calm herself. "Honey," I called softly. I turned back. "Yes, do you remember what your dad and Belle texted each other?" She thought for a moment. "Not really just random stuff. One time he sent a bunch of emojis and said you were a savior. Another time he said he missed the way you teased him." I felt that prickling sensation behind my eyes, like betrayal dressed up in a simple, everyday text. I nodded slowly, not wanting him to see the pain written all over my face. She didn't understand the weight of her words. She simply remembered what remained. Children are like that. They record things adults think are invisible, and somewhere between the selfish text messages and the furtive exchanges they, Belle and Nate, forgot one thing children are always listening and always learning. We got home. As I turned off the car, I took a deep breath and made a choice. No more silence. No more excuses for adults to think that love is something that can be bartered or bargained for. That night after Laya went to bed, I texted Nate, my brother and sister. I know. Laya has seen enough to know, and now I do too. No curse words, no accusations, just clarity. Then I sent another message to Belle. "I won't stop Laya from knowing who you are. Today she found out for herself. And I won't pretend you're worthy of her admiration anymore." I don't expect a reply, nor do I need one, because this is not about revenge, but to liberate. For years I have believed that keeping loved ones close, no matter the circumstances, is right. Accepting the coldness, the teasing, and the emotional distance is better than being too sensitive. But standing in that perfect kitchen, watching her smirk at the card filled with the love of a child, I finally saw it. Family is not blood. Family is protection. It is there when needed. Be the one you choose to fight for, not the one you hold back out of obligation. And Laya, she did what I couldn't do for all these years. She pulled the curtain down with just one honest sentence. "I didn't do it to hurt anyone. I speak only as only children can, with the truth, no other intention, and all love." And that moment, that simple sentence I wrote, like you wrote in the message to her, exposed a long chain of hidden betrayals. But it also reminds me why I fight. Not because of a rotten concept of family, but because of my daughter. Because of her clarity, her gentleness, and her unwavering honesty. Because if a little girl can face cruelty and still open her arms to give love, then a mother must stand by her child and never let her child doubt her worth. I told the truth, and that set me free. The next morning I watched Laya eat her cereal, humming softly as if yesterday was just a small stone thrown into a still lake. Children are so resilient. But what adults often forget is being resilient doesn't mean they don't get hurt. They just recover faster and hide the pain in hidden corners that sometimes we don't know where to find. I poured the coffee and stood there momentarily looking at her. The way your toes curl around the bar under the seat. The way the child carefully stirs the spoon around the edge of the bowl so the milk doesn't splash out. She is so small, But yesterday I said something that shattered the whole truth, like broken glass, and I don't even know what I just did. That's what keeps echoing in my head. Laya had no idea the weight her words carried. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just want to do the right thing. Wanted to show Miss Bell that I paid attention and tried my best. That's what melted me, the love in her intention and the slap in Bell's reaction. Betrayal simmers beneath the surface like something rotting behind the clean floor. I sat across from him, then reached and took his hand. "Honey, can I ask you something?" He nodded, his mouth still full of cereal. "Yesterday, when you were talking to Miss Bell about spelling your name, did you feel something was wrong, or were you just trying to help?" He blinked a few times and shrugged. I just remembered it from Dad's phone. "I thought you'd like it because you're a grown-up and you spell it out. I thought, I don't know, you'd think I was smart." I smiled, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You are smart, my dear. Very smart and brave. Even though it surprised everyone, I am proud of what you said." The girl grinned, nodded, and reached for her juice as if the conversation were over. And in a way, it was over, because Laya has moved on. I don't know the storm I just stirred up, but I know. That night, something inside me changed. I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, turning everything over and over in my head. For years, I doubted myself, ignored my instincts, tried to hold on to a family that never wanted to hold me back. I remember how Belle teased me about motherhood, always wrapping it in friendly criticism. The way she said she was just being honest while cutting into the deepest parts of me that took years to learn to protect. I thought about Nate's long silences, excuses, and sudden understanding of my sister's quirks. It wasn't just whispers behind my back. It's the emotional termites gnawing away at our faith, confidence, and ability to stand up and say enough. But Laya, she gave them the truth in a card covered in glitter. And that truth blew everything away. In the following days, I did not contact Belle again. I also didn't respond to Nate's second or third text, or the one he tried to blame. We were just talking, nothing happened. Don't make a big deal out of it. I don't understand, and probably never will understand. Because this is about more than just physical betrayal. It's about loyalty, about trust, about emotional ethics. I'm not angry because they talk behind my back. I'm angry because they think it doesn't matter. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought Laya wouldn't either. I sat down with my son a week later and made another card. This time not for anyone else, but it's a card from me to you. On the outside, I wrote my child's name in big letters and drew stars around it. Inside, I wrote, "To my Laya, I spelled the truth. I said it with love. You are all that is right in this world, and you are never too young to be heard." The girl finished reading, was silent for a moment, then smiled. I hugged the card to my chest as if I were holding a treasure. That card is still on my bedside table. I don't know what I taught my mother that day. I just thought I spelled the name wrong, then corrected it. But I know better. You remind me that children see what adults try to hide. That silence is not protection, but permission. And speaking the truth, even wrapped in innocence, can be the bravest act in the world. There was a time when I wondered raising a child without a complete family would create a void in the child's life. Now I know I'm not raising my kids on less. I am raising my child with the truth. And that is always enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had someone take your child for granted or have had to find strength amid betrayal, I hope this story gives you something to hold on to. Children notice everything, and sometimes it's our children who teach us how to be strong. If this story resonates with you, please give the video a like. It helps more people find it. Share with someone who needs reminding that the truth, however small and quiet, can change everything. And if you want to hear more true stories like this, hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss the following video. Tell me in the comments, has a child ever surprised you with something they saw or said? I read every comment and I want to hear your story. See you next time and take care of yourself and your loved ones.